If you have $5,000 saved in the bank, do this immediately. Did you know that the same $5,000 currently sitting in your account can be the starting point to conquer your financial freedom? While you're congratulating yourself for being a diligent saver, that money is quietly losing value every single day. Here's the brutal reality. Inflation is silently eating away at your purchasing power while you sleep, turning your hard-earned savings into less money than when you first deposited it. Many people believe that saving money is already enough, but the truth is that without a strategy, your $5,000 becomes $4,800 in real purchasing power within just 1 year. Meanwhile, people who understand how money actually works are using that same amount to build wealth that grows faster than inflation can destroy it. The secret lies in knowing how to deploy that resource the right way, not just to protect yourself, but to multiply your wealth systematically. If today you have around $5,000 saved, there are specific smart actions you can take to extract maximum value from that money, instead of letting it waste away in a basic savings account. In this video, I reveal 5 strategic steps to transform your $5,000 from idle money into wealth-building capital. Step number 5, it's where your money finally starts working harder than you do. Before we dive into the first one, hit subscribe, turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos, and comment "money to work" along with your current savings goal. Thank you so much, and now we're getting started. Step 1. Protect what you've built. The first strategic step for your $5,000 is the one most people ignore until it's too late. Protecting what you've accumulated from the countless threats that destroy wealth faster than you can build it. Many people start well, accumulate initial savings, but end up losing it all due to lack of care, impatience, or falling for schemes that promise miraculous returns. The reality is that protecting your money requires just as much strategy as growing it, and without this foundation, all other wealth-building efforts become meaningless. In the ancient mountain kingdoms where precious treasures determined the survival and prosperity of entire communities, there lived 2 men who had each managed to accumulate substantial wealth through years of disciplined effort and careful resource management. Both possessed similar amounts of gold and valuable assets, yet their approaches to protecting their accumulated treasures would determine not only their personal futures but the security of their families for generations. The first man, known as the Wise Fortress Guardian, understood that accumulated wealth attracted numerous threats that required systematic defense strategies. He had witnessed countless wealthy individuals lose everything to thieves, fraudsters, and their own impulsive decisions during moments of weakness or desperation. The Wise Fortress Guardian invested significant time and resources into building secure storage systems, developing relationships with trustworthy advisors, and creating multiple layers of protection around his treasures. Most importantly, the Wise Fortress Guardian recognized that his greatest enemy was not external theft, but his own impatience and susceptibility to promises of easy wealth multiplication. He had seen wealthy merchants lose fortunes by chasing rumors of magical investment opportunities or partnering with charismatic strangers who promised to double their money within months. The Wise Fortress Guardian developed strict rules for himself. Never invest in anything he didn't understand completely. Never risk more than small portions of his wealth on unproven opportunities, and never make financial decisions during emotional states of excitement or desperation. He understood that protecting wealth required boring consistency rather than exciting adventures. The second man, called the Reckless Treasure Hunter, believed that accumulated wealth should be aggressively deployed to find even greater treasures as quickly as possible. When charismatic strangers arrived in his village, promising incredible returns on mysterious ventures, the reckless treasure hunter would eagerly commit large portions of his savings without thoroughly investigating the opportunities. The reckless treasure hunter's impatience led him to constantly chase rumored treasure locations. invest in elaborate schemes that promised immediate wealth multiplication, and abandon careful protective measures in favor of pursuing exciting possibilities that rarely materialized as promised. Years later, while the wise fortress guardian had not only preserved his original wealth, but grown it steadily through proven methods, the reckless treasure hunter had lost everything to a series of fraudulent schemes and impulsive decisions that had seemed promising at the time. Here's what that story reveals about protecting your $5,000. If someone offers 10% returns per month without risk, be suspicious. It's probably fraud. Stay away from miraculous promises. Take care of your physical and mental health, because it's useless to accumulate money if quality of life disappears. And be prepared for something nobody talks about: boredom. Investing is a slow process, and you'll be constantly tempted to speed things up through bad decisions. But protection is meaningless without the fuel to sustain growth. Step 2. Increase investment capacity. The second strategic step reveals a harsh mathematical reality. Saving and strategically deploying the $5,000 you have today is an excellent start, but that alone will not bring you true financial independence. The key is transforming this into a constant cycle, increasing your income and the amount you invest month by month. Without expanding your earning capacity, you'll remain trapped in slow wealth building that may take decades to produce meaningful results, if ever. In the vast landscapes where water systems determined the prosperity and growth potential of entire civilizations, there existed two water sources that had started with identical natural advantages and similar initial flow rates. Both possessed the fundamental capacity to support thriving communities, yet their approaches to development and expansion would create dramatically different outcomes for long-term abundance and sustainability. The first water source, known as the expanding river, understood that its initial flow was merely the foundation for something much larger and more powerful. The expanding river systematically worked to attract and incorporate additional tributary streams from surrounding areas, recognizing that each new water source would multiply its overall capacity and reach. The expanding river actively sought connections with seasonal streams during rainy periods, developed channels that could capture runoff from mountain slopes, and created systems that could collect and redirect water from various sources throughout its territory. Each new tributary required initial effort and resources to establish proper connections, but once integrated, these additional streams provided ongoing flow that dramatically increased the river's total capacity. Most importantly, the expanding river understood that growth required reinvestment of resources. Instead of simply enjoying its current flow, it would systematically use portions of its water capacity to develop new channels, dig deeper connections to underground sources, and create infrastructure that would enable even greater expansion in the future. Over time, the expanding river's strategy of continuous expansion and tributary development transformed it from a modest water source into a powerful river system that could support multiple large communities, enable extensive agriculture, and provide abundant resources for trade and commerce. The second water source, called the stagnant pond, is believed that it's an initial capacity that is sufficient and requires no expansion or development efforts. The stagnant pond took pride in its current size and flow rate, assuming that maintaining its existing level was adequate for long-term success. The stagnant pond made no efforts to attract additional water sources, develop connections with potential tributaries, or create systems that could expand its capacity. When seasonal streams offered opportunities for integration, the stagnant pond ignored these possibilities, preferring to maintain its familiar size and established boundaries. While the stagnant pond's approach required less effort and complexity, it created a fundamental limitation. Its capacity could never exceed its original natural advantages. As surrounding areas developed and water demands increased, the stagnant pond found itself increasingly inadequate to support growing communities or compete with more dynamic water systems. Years later, The expanding river had become a major waterway supporting thriving civilizations, while the stagnant pond remained a small, limited resource that could barely sustain basic needs for a few families. Here's what that story reveals about increasing investment capacity. This can be achieved through extra jobs in your free time, such as selling products online, teaching classes, providing services, or creating content. Another alternative is further training, because the more skills you develop, the more value you deliver, and the more value you deliver, the more you can charge. It's also worth rethinking your career and seeking more profitable areas or negotiating better conditions in your current job. Most critically, all money that comes in and is not essential for the short term should be reinvested. That's how compound interest really works. Here's where most people's wealth-building efforts hit a mathematical wall that destroys progress faster than they can build it. Step 3. Eliminate high-interest debt. The third strategic step addresses a mathematical trap that destroys wealth faster than most people realize: carrying high-interest debt while simultaneously trying to build investments. Here's the brutal math that will shock you. While your investments might yield 10 to 12% annually, credit card debts and personal loans can easily reach 40, 60, or even more percent per year. In other words, what you earn on one side, you lose double on the other side. Paying off a debt with 50% annual interest is like having an immediate, guaranteed return of 50% on your money. In the drought-stricken valleys, where every drop of precious water meant the difference between community survival and catastrophic failure, there lived two water management specialists who had been tasked with maintaining adequate water supplies for their growing populations. Both men understood the critical importance of water conservation, yet their approaches to managing water loss would create dramatically different outcomes for their community's long-term sustainability. The first specialist, known as the leaking bucket manager, had inherited a water collection system that included numerous containers of various sizes for storing precious water during scarce periods. However, the leaking bucket manager had never systematically inspected his storage containers for damage or deterioration that might be causing gradual water loss. The leaking bucket manager would work tirelessly each day to collect water from distant sources, carrying heavy loads across difficult terrain and investing enormous effort in filling his storage containers. He took pride in his dedication and felt satisfied watching water levels rise in his buckets throughout each collection period. However, the leaking bucket manager had never realized that his storage system was riddled with small holes, cracks, and deteriorated seals that were causing steady water drainage. While he focused his attention on collecting new water, his existing reserves were quietly disappearing through dozens of tiny but persistent leaks that seemed insignificant individually but created devastating cumulative loss. The mathematical reality was harsh. The leaking bucket manager was losing water through his damaged containers faster than he could collect new water through his daily efforts. Despite his exhausting work schedule and genuine dedication, his community's water reserves continued declining because he was addressing symptoms rather than the cause. The second specialist, called the sealed vessel keeper, took a completely different approach that initially seemed less impressive but proved far more effective. Before investing any effort in collecting additional water, the sealed vessel keeper systematically inspected every storage container, identifying and repairing every crack, hole, and damaged seal that could cause water loss. The sealed vessel keeper understood something profound that his counterpart had missed. Preventing water loss was mathematically more valuable than collecting new water. Each drop saved through proper container maintenance was a drop that would remain available indefinitely, while each drop collected into leaking containers would eventually disappear, regardless of collection efforts. Once the sealed vessel keeper had eliminated all sources of water loss from his storage system, every drop of newly collected water would remain in reserve, creating steadily growing water supplies that provided genuine security for his community. Years later, while the leaking bucket manager remained trapped in exhausting cycles of constant water collection that never built lasting reserves, the sealed vessel keeper had created abundant water security through systematic leak elimination followed by efficient collection. Here's what that story reveals about debt elimination. If you have high-interest debts, particularly credit cards, overdrafts, and personal loans, eliminating these should be your immediate priority after building emergency reserves. Stop financing unnecessary things. Buying what you do not need with money you do not have is what keeps thousands of people trapped in debt. Every dollar you stop paying in interest is a dollar that stays in your pocket with guaranteed returns. All growth becomes pointless without this next crucial safety foundation. Step 4. Build a proper emergency reserve. The fourth strategic step establishes the foundation that makes all other wealth-building activities possible. Creating a proper emergency reserve that serves as protection rather than wealth generation. The main goal of your financial reserve is not to make you rich, but to serve as a shield against unforeseen events. Without this buffer, any financial setback will force you to derail your investment plans, liquidate growing assets, or resort to expensive credit that destroys years of progress in weeks. In the Fertile Valley regions where communities had learned to thrive during abundant seasons but faced periodic challenges from unpredictable weather patterns and natural disasters, there existed two settlements of similar size and resources that approached crisis preparation with fundamentally different philosophies about resource allocation and risk management. The first community, known as the Storm Ready Village, had developed comprehensive emergency preparation systems based on careful analysis of historical patterns and potential threats. The village leaders understood that while they couldn't predict exactly when emergencies would occur, they could guarantee that unexpected challenges would eventually test their community's resilience and survival capabilities. The Storm Ready Village maintained multiple layers of emergency reserves carefully calibrated to different types and severities of potential crises. They kept immediate access supplies equivalent to basic emergency needs, enough food, water, and essential materials to handle sudden problems like equipment failures, minor disasters, or short-term supply disruptions that required quick response without major lifestyle changes. Beyond these immediate reserves, the Storm Ready Village also maintained extended emergency supplies equivalent to 3 to 12 months of normal consumption, depending on their community's risk tolerance and the nature of potential threats they faced. Community members who preferred maximum security maintained 12 months of reserves, while those willing to accept slightly higher risk maintained 3 to 6 months of supplies. Most importantly, the Storm Ready Village established strict protocols about when and how emergency reserves could be accessed. These supplies were available for genuine emergencies, but protected from impulsive use during non-crisis situations. Community members understood that a seasonal celebration or desire for upgraded equipment did not constitute legitimate reasons for accessing emergency reserves. The second community, called the Unprepared Settlement, operated under the assumption that their current prosperity and abundant seasons would continue indefinitely without major interruptions. The settlement's residents believed that maintaining emergency supplies represented wasted resources that could be used for immediate enjoyment or comfort improvements. The Unprepared Settlement consumed all available resources during abundant periods, invested nothing in crisis preparation, and assumed that if problems arose, they could be addressed through borrowing, seeking help from other communities, or simply enduring temporary hardship until normal conditions returned. When inevitable regional challenges struck, severe weather, supply chain disruptions, and economic difficulties that affected multiple communities simultaneously, the contrast between the two settlements became dramatic and undeniable. The Storm Ready Village activated its emergency systems smoothly. drawing from immediate access reserves for urgent needs and extended supplies for sustained support during the prolonged recovery period. Community life continued with minimal disruption, and residents could focus their energy on rebuilding and improvement rather than basic survival. Meanwhile, the unprepared settlement faced an immediate crisis because it had no buffer between its daily needs and external circumstances. Residents were forced to make desperate decisions, accept unfavorable borrowing terms, or abandon their homes entirely when challenges exceeded their capacity to respond. Here's what that story reveals about emergency reserves. Start with a minimum $2,000 for basic emergencies like car repairs, home maintenance, or broken appliances. Then build 3 to 12 months of living expenses. If your monthly costs are $3,000, your reserve should be $9,000 to $36,000. Keep this in high-yield accounts with easy access and only touch it for real emergencies. A clothing sale doesn't count as an emergency. This final step is where your money transforms from idle storage into wealth-generating capital. Step 5. Start real investing. The fifth and final strategic step transforms your money from idle storage into wealth-generating capital that works harder than you do. Here's the reality check that changes everything. If you leave your $5,000 in a basic savings account, yielding close to standard market rates, after 1 year, you'll have around $5,600. That's good, but let's be honest, it's still minimal progress. However, when part of that amount gets allocated to assets that grow above inflation and truly multiply your wealth, the game changes completely. This is where real investments come into play. In the agricultural regions, where communities face the choice between immediate consumption and long-term prosperity, there lived two resource managers who had each accumulated substantial stores of grain through years of careful harvesting and disciplined saving. Both possessed identical amounts of high-quality grain that could either sustain their families immediately or be deployed strategically for future abundance. Yet their approaches to resource utilization would create vastly different outcomes for generational wealth. The first manager, known as the grain hoarder, believed that security came from accumulating and storing as much grain as possible in protected granaries, where it would remain safe from theft, weather, and uncertainty. The grain hoarder took great pride in his impressive storage facilities and the substantial quantities of grain he had systematically collected over many seasons. The grain hoarder's approach felt safe and predictable because he could see his accumulated resources, count his stored grain, and feel confident that his family would have food available during difficult periods. However, the grain hoarder never realized that his stored grain was slowly losing value through natural deterioration, pest damage, and changing market conditions that reduced demand for older grain varieties. Most critically, the grain hoarder's storage-focused strategy meant his resources could never grow beyond what he personally collected through manual labor. His wealth remained static, providing temporary security but offering no potential for multiplication or expansion that could benefit future generations. The second manager, called the seed planter, understood something profound about resource deployment that would transform his family's long-term prosperity. Instead of storing all his grain for immediate security, the seed planter systematically allocated portions of his harvest for planting new crops that would produce exponentially greater yields in future seasons. The seed planter diversified his planting strategy across different types of crops. Some fast-growing varieties that would provide returns within single seasons, others that required longer development periods but would produce abundant harvests for many years, and even some experimental crops that carried higher risk but offered potential for extraordinary yields. The seed planter also invested in tools and equipment that could generate ongoing income, purchasing a grain mill that other farmers would pay to use, acquiring land that could be rented to expanding families, and even developing specialized processing techniques that commanded premium prices in regional markets. While the seed planter's approach initially seemed riskier because he was converting stored grain into planted seeds that might fail. His diversified strategy created multiple streams of growing abundance that far exceeded what storage alone could provide. Years later, the grain hoarder still possessed roughly the same amount of aging grain he had originally stored, while the seed planter had created an expanding agricultural empire that produced ongoing harvests, rental income, and processing profits that sustained multiple generations. Here's what that story reveals about real investing. Today, you can buy fractions of stocks with less than $10, invest in real estate funds starting from $100, or build ETF portfolios with small amounts. A sample $5,000 allocation might include $1,000 in solid company stocks, $1,000 in real estate funds, $1,000 in ETFs following major indexes, $500 in cryptocurrencies, with the remainder for emergencies. You can also consider physical income-generating assets, equipment that can be rented for recurring income. Now let's bring all 5 strategic steps together into your complete wealth-building system. There you have it, 5 strategic steps that transform your $5,000 from idle money losing value to inflation into wealth-building capital. Protecting accumulated wealth from fraud and impatience that destroy fortunes faster than you can build them. Increasing your investment capacity through expanded income streams and skill development. Eliminating high-interest debt that mathematically destroys wealth faster than investments can grow it. Building proper emergency reserves that serve as shields against setbacks rather than wealth generators. And finally, deploying money into real investments where it works harder than you do. The critical insight is that those $5,000 represent far more than their face value. They represent a mindset shift from passive storage to strategic deployment. While inflation silently erodes money sitting in basic accounts, strategic allocation across emergency funds, debt elimination, and growth investments create systems that compound wealth over time. Your challenge starting today: stop letting your money lose purchasing power through inaction and start implementing these steps systematically. Which step will you tackle first and why? Comment below with your biggest takeaway. And if this changed how you see your savings, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos that turn financial knowledge into wealth-building action. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, financial freedom starts with strategic thinking, not large amounts.